Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ecoffee with Experts. My name is Matt Fraser, and today on the show, I have with me a very special guest, Richard Monheit. Richard has worked on a variety of customers across digital marketing with a particular focus on search and marketing automation, one of my favorite subjects. This has involved working with clients across a diverse range of industry verticals. He is passionate about digital trends and getting the best results for his clients. Having studied a business marketing and business management double degree at Monash, he has an excellent understanding of how to tie business performance to marketing. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. So Richard, you've had an interesting journey so far. Who was Richard as a school kid?
Well, when I was pretty young, I was more or less straight and narrow. And then I think, as most kids tend to veer a little bit off there for a period. Before, I probably won't go into too much detail there, but went off for a little bit, but, never too far, and probably built a good network of friends, a lot of which I'm still friends with today, actually. That's, I think, really important for future business, to be honest, in terms of having a core group of people around you. Did quite a lot of travel, and, working as well as school. So, pretty cheeky, if I could summarize myself. Yeah. I think probably the best thing that, when I was about 3, my mum bought me this t-shirt, which on the front said, it was like, because I used to always be on my tricycle. And so on the front, it says, "Here comes trouble." And on the back, it said, "There goes trouble." So,
yeah, I got a nephew that's like that.
Yeah.
He's 3.
Yeah. So, but look, still focused on study and building good mates and friendships, but probably having a good balance, I think, is key.
Oh, right on. So when did you know, like they say that the entrepreneurs, you can identify them at a very young age. Like, I was doing things at 5 that were characteristics of entrepreneurial qualities. But what about yourself? When did you know that you first wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, and you definitely hear a lot of stories and hear what people are, this guy was doing this when they were 3 or 5 or 10, and they were out there selling lemonade and sort of stuff. For me, I'll be honest, like that was never really a big thing for me when I was younger. I was probably more like hoping just to be a sports, into football, like thought I, could turn into a legit sports star, but by the time you're about 14, you realize that's probably unrealistic, that's actually not the way that it's going to play out. So look, to be honest, I probably didn't have that when I was growing up. Like I wasn't really like, this is, I'm going to run a business, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It was more, like I do what I like. And probably spent a fair bit of time in corporate prior to starting my own business. But the takeout out of that is that, for those of you who are listening to the show that haven't, come from that background or didn't necessarily have that upbringing to some degree, or kind of, always wanted to do that sort of stuff, there's still plenty of opportunities to do it, right? Like, you don't have to think you're not that person. It's a matter of just, starting something, maybe a side hustle, maybe it's a, full-on business, but probably have a go is probably the key, I'd say. And, but before I ended up in the business, now I probably had 2 or 3, failed business ventures. So just give it a crack is probably the, the main thing.
Yeah. How long did you work in corporate for?
About 7, 8 years. So did it enough to know that I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. Do you think that your experience in corporate has helped you in regards to your business, running your business today?
Yeah, I do.
In what ways do you think?
Well, probably the partner that I started my business with, we were both working at the same corporate at the same time, and we happened to leave at the same time, not with the plan to start it up, but probably that kind of helped. But I guess also understanding how corporates run their business, some things you like, some things you don't like, even how they charge clients, how you manage client expectations. I think that's some stuff that you can learn when you're at corporate that probably it helps when it's not your money that's at risk, to go through those learnings. But I would say there's definitely still value that I had out of that. And you learn it's just different lessons, right? And understanding how to play the game, to be honest, like that's part of corporate. You've got to know how to position yourself. And that's, not a factor when you've got a small business, but as the business grows, then you probably start having different challenges in terms of how you manage your team. And all of that, I think I've taken from corporate to help me run Sharp Instincts now.
All right on. So what do you enjoy most about entrepreneurship?
Um, I think the flexibility in terms of both, lifestyle, but also every day is different. Even though, like, particularly in digital marketing where, I'm operating and, you're talking about and operating, it's so fluid in terms of what's going on all the time. So I think those two are probably the most important things. And I've got like a young daughter, so having some flexibility in terms of working when you want, in terms of hours, etc., is probably a plus. I think that's probably open to a lot more people now because of COVID, and everyone's looking at some sort of hybrid model, or how are you going to manage your staff, etc. I think that's probably one of the benefits, you could say, for a lot of employees out there, but also as an entrepreneur and people that kind of start business. I think that's a rare thing, that managing your time and having more time to decide to do what you want, probably as big of a bonus as you can get, really.
Absolutely. So how are you finding the whole hybrid work from home thing within your agency? Have you always been a remote mainly company, or are you offering a hybrid model, or?
Look, I guess the one thing, predominantly digital agency, we were kind of set up for COVID, right? So like everything was already online. There is definitely some challenges now in terms of what it looks like, the model. And I think it's still not clear, to be honest, in terms of obviously, the market in Australia in particular is very employee weighted at this point in time, I would say, where there's a real challenge about getting the right people in. And if you don't offer that flexibility, then probably you're going to lose people. Look, I think at this point you have to have some version of hybrid. We're still predominantly remote at this point. And again, like, we're set up to run there. I do still think you miss out on some stuff that, the learning of on-the-job learning, team environment. There are some skills there that probably do get missed, especially if you're new staff or you're new to the workforce and understanding kind of what the level of expectation is. I think that's probably some challenges there. At the moment we're probably more of in the hybrid remote sort of area, but look, ideally I'd like at some point to get more people back in the office and get everyone back, because I do think there's a lot of benefit there from having, a bunch of people sitting together, and rather than 50 messages back and forth, try and resolve something in one meeting. Because I think you do find a lot of, meetings after meeting after meeting, and then you end up doing work in the hours that you shouldn't be. So, I want my staff and my team to have a good work-life balance. So I think there's still a bit of work to be done there, probably not just with us, but with everyone.
So that leads to my next question is, as the co-founder and director of Sharp Industries, how do you yourself manage your work-life balance? What are some strategies you use?
Look, I think it's a matter of, sorry, just to clarify, it's Sharp Instincts, just to make sure.
Sharp Instincts, yeah.
Yeah,
maybe my accent got in the way.
Yeah, that's right, no stress. A lot of people have a struggle understanding me with the Australian accent. But anyway, so look, I guess it's a matter of finding a few different avenues that work for you. So like I like doing exercise, whether it's running, swimming, etc. Probably try and get up early and do some of that, and as well, like, spend some time with my family as well as work. So really, it's probably about finding the right balance for you. Obviously, also people have different ways of working in terms of what hours they're best operating. I'm more of a morning person than an evening person, but it depends on your staff member. I think you just got to be you've got to be a bit more relaxed about it these days. And it's not so much, I've never really been a big believer in check in, check out sort of thing. It's more around what's the value being contributed. If everything's measurable and whatever, then probably if your preference is to work from midnight till 3 a.m., then I've got no issues with that, as long as the outcome's there. But having the right work-life balance, I think it's a matter of just making sure you allocate time, get a proper night's sleep, all of that kind of, if you don't sleep right, follow through the rest of the week. There's a few things there.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of stuff written about that, and but I think it's what works for you. Everyone kind of operates differently, so
for sure.
Yeah.
So how do you manage your physical health within a sedentary job role?
Not well. I think you got to have the right setup. Again, like, it comes back, because you're remote, right? Like, if you're working from home, or if you're working from the office, having the right setup, the right chair, the right screens. Like, some people, like, I go to some people's, my friend's house, and they're working off like a tiny laptop, and they're sitting there for 10 hours a day. Like, spend $100, buy another screen, do it properly. It's not good for you to be hunched over all day like this, trying to write stuff.
No.
Yeah. So, but some of it's just default, and I'm guilty of it too, right? Like, you slump in your chair, you got to try and remind yourself to sit up straight and kind of do it properly. And it's harder when it's at home because maybe, you're not necessarily putting on the suit like you used to, or putting on the gear to kind of get ready for work like you used to. So I would say, you've got to make the conscious effort, whether it's even just like a little sticky note on your computer, sit straight, whatever it is, that kind of works for me, to try and help you to remember. But I think it's, as we were kind of talking about before, also doing some other activities outside of work to probably offset the fact that you're sitting in your desk for, 8-9 hours a day or however long you're sitting there, without doing a lot of movement.
Absolutely. So I'm just curious, what are some hard choices you've had to make to get where you are today with your agency?
I think the one that I've, that's been a challenge. So there's probably two that come to mind. So the first one is deciding who are the right sort of clients that we want to deal with, right? So why is that a hard choice? Is because sometimes we say no to clients, like people who approach us like, yeah, I want to do stuff, I'm ready to go, like we've got money, etc. If I don't think we can add value back to the business and actually contribute, or if they're just doing it to check a box, but I know they're actually not going to value what we're going to say, then I'm probably going to say no to that, even though there's an opportunity there. And I think that's something you can only learn after having done it a couple of times. And, you get to an end of a project or working with a client and you just say, all right, I'm not going to go through that again because that was not good, because that also takes you away from doing other stuff. So it's been a hard kind of learning that you go through, but I'd say, now making a decision, is this the sort of client we want to make, want to work with? Do we think we can add value? That's probably, one that's been a challenge. And I think the other one that's difficult for all businesses is how to price correctly. What is the right pricing? And that doesn't matter whatever you're selling, right? Like, if you can sell a coffee, you're selling this, you're selling this, and services in particular, I find are a challenge. And we have discussions with our clients all the time about, the right pricing strategy, etc. But that's a tough one, and there's no easy answer in terms of that. That's really a matter of really understanding your target market as much as anything in terms of what's possible. But that's a difficult one for any business, I would say.
Mm-hmm. What you mentioned, like clients that are maybe possibly difficult to work with. You hinted at that. Are there like red flags that over the years you've identified right away that have taught you, okay, no, like that have made you realize you need to say no?
It's tough, I would say, but there are some kind of flags that I would say. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, like what would I, if I'm initially struggling to kind of get even any clarity in terms of a meeting, if there's a lot of people involved in the decision making, but I can't get an answer in terms of budget, proposal, etc., that probably raises a flag for me, because then it's like, all right, if we can't even decide on what the scope of the project is, this is going to cause me a whole bunch of problems down the line. And generally, to be honest, I'm just looking at how the person, how much respect and kind of honest, open dialogue we have. If they're very closed, even they're rude about it, then probably, the answer is that if they're rude to you at the initial meetings, then probably that's not someone you and your business wants to deal with ongoing, because it's going to stress your life out, and yes, there might be money on the table, but what's the cost of doing that business? Sometimes the answer is not always just take the money. The answer might be, well, I'm not going to, this is going to cause me a bunch of issues with 20 other clients because I'm going to spend all my time stressing about this one. And that's not the right outcome for any client. And there are plenty of business out there. There'll be someone else who'll be happy to take that, but that's not me in our business. And we work very much on honesty, transparency. And if you're not coming to the table with that sort of kind of attitude, then that's probably not the right fit.
Yeah, I hear you. So if they're, they're ambiguous about their budget, wanting you to guess.
Exactly.
How do you expect me to tell you what we can do if you don't tell me what your budget is? It's not like if you tell me your budget's 30 grand, I'm gonna make something mad, like make something up to spend your 30 grand. It's just
look, budget's one that a lot of clients, some clients will tell you straight up, and some clients will give you nothing. It's like, you tell me. Well, okay. And look, again, that might be a flag for some businesses, but look, what you don't want to do is do all the work. And one thing that is difficult in an agency setup is you might go and do all this creative, do all this work to kind of win the business or try and win the business and take on a lot of cost on your perspective, and then you get to the end, it's like, oh, we don't have any money. I was like, wow, you could have told me that like before we went and invested all this time. But that's I guess as an agency, that's kind of doing business, right?
Yeah, I've been there. I've done it. So yeah. So how did you first learn about digital marketing and getting into this space?
It's funny you asked that question because I was actually talking about it with someone a few days ago, and
Oh yeah.
when I was like discussing it, so I finished uni like whatever it is, like 15 years ago now. So quite a
Okay.
while ago, right? And when I was at uni, I think there was one class taught about digital marketing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so, and like this is, and this isn't a shit university. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but let's say that I am. Otherwise, you can just cut it out.
That's all good. Go ahead. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Our audience are all adults.
No, so it's a good uni, right? Like it's a quality
Yeah.
institution known as a business school, etc. But you have to
Mm-hmm.
remember, internet digital marketing, it's still really new, right? So,
Yeah.
and occasionally I'll see someone come in with a resume. It's like, I have 20 years digital experience. I was like, well, that's impossible because it's really been around for that long, So yeah,
No,
if
it
you put
hasn't.
that in your resume, you're straight up a liar. I'm calling that now.
Yeah.
But look, to be honest, answer your question, it's really self-taught, right? Like
Yeah.
you've got to go out there and try yourself. I mentioned earlier, like I've done a few businesses that failed, the best way to learn Google Ads is to do it yourself, right? And run some campaigns and test and find and see, try this, try that. That's the way you're going to know. And look, the one thing I will say is there's a lot more information out there now, right? Like programs like yourself, other stuff that just didn't really exist when, freedom of information in terms of that degree. You can go watch a whole bunch of YouTube videos like this, learn how to do this, learn how to do that. There's a lot of experts out there who are really good, who will kind of give you some advice, but probably, the best way you learn is do it yourself, give it a crack, and then you'll be like, all right, now I actually know what did work, doesn't work, and that's not taking away from universities, but I think that's probably an area that's really evolved in terms of if you want to learn and you want to teach yourself, there's amazing amounts of information out there to go out there and upskill yourself in whatever area, whether it's marketing automation, whether it's Google Ads, whether it's SEO, whatever it is, design, there's some amazing, and most of it's free, right? Like there is some stuff and you can pay for courses, but there's a lot of stuff that's just out there if you just got to be passionate about it.
Are there any resources off the top of your head that you would, if someone was just starting out, you would tell them to take?
It depends on what specifically like you're wanting to learn. Like for example, like if let's say SEO is a key thing for you, like I follow Neil Patel. He's really good. His Uber Suggest out there is good, and and he does like weekly blogs, like podcasts, videos. He writes heaps of good stuff. Like that is an example. Like there's a lot of info, so he's probably a good one. And then websites. It depends what you're after again, and whether you're coming to learn from it like holistically, or whether it's my business and I'm trying to upskill. That's probably the question. But like he's a good one. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. For me, it's more about just staying passionate about the area. As I said, you kind of go down a wormhole in terms of, all right, I want to learn about this, and you can start from almost no knowledge and come out with a pretty good end result, to be honest.
Do you think people should take a holistic approach to learning about digital marketing, or just focus on one specific skill set? For instance, do you think they should learn just Google Ads, or should they learn a lot about Google Ads and then something about analytics and a little bit about SEO to see how they all fit together?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think holistic approach is good. I think you need to understand that. I think the challenge with digital is that everything's connected. So if you just know Google Ads, like that's great, but probably understanding everything, and that doesn't mean you have to have a deep understanding and knowledge of everything, but like some level of knowledge of, to your point, analytics, AdWords, organic, where does let's say your social media fit. Looking at a bunch of different areas and what role do they play, I think is important. It doesn't, and I guess also if you go down that path, then you might find I'm particularly interested in this topic, and then you might become more of an expert in a specific topic. But I think you should have some level of knowledge of each of them just to really kind of understand the market, and it's always changing. So it's not like you can just like, oh, cool, I'm done. It's a matter of reading new stuff, what's coming out, and that's all areas, whether it's Google Ads, whether it's organic, whether it's analytics, like there's a bunch, the changes are happening all the time. So it's a matter of just kind of rolling with it and keep learning and keep upskilling, and not think you're at the point where, look, I'm good now, because that's just not realistic.
Yeah. How do you keep your staff sharp and up to date in their skill sets?
I think probably initially the first question is like, are they passionate before you hire them? Like what sort of stuff are they reading? What sort of questions are you asking them to find out? Because I think if they're not, if you hire the people that aren't passionate at the start, then they're not going to be passionate after the fact. Like, it's not like I can be like, hey, you should go read this, because like the answer,
Yeah.
we'll try that, and they don't become, it's not something you then become passionate about. Like, you're either interested in all this stuff or you're not, pretty much, is probably our take. And then probably to, if they are interested, or if we're trying to get them interested and whatever, it's a matter of just, everyone reads different stuff. I'd probably say, here's an article I read, whether it's through Slack or whether it's through Skype or whatever kind of Asana, or whatever tools you're using to kind of share information internally. It's important to kind of, I found something, this is valuable, and kind of keep passing it between staff and kind of upskilling everyone together, because you can't read everything. But if someone can say, I read this and this is really good, or here's an interesting point in this article which talks about, how to get more out of local ads or whatever it might be, I think that's probably a good way to go about it.
Oh, fantastic. Hey, in 2016, you started Sharp Instincts, right? That's the name, Sharp Instincts.
That's the one, yeah.
How did that happen?
So what happened was, as I was working in corporate, and what I found was that a lot of the discussions with clients were not really about what was in the best interest of the client. It was more just like, here's the sales targets, go out and sell this. And I kind of had an issue with that, to be honest. Like, I didn't think that was the right way to go about it. So I probably just said, look, that's fine. I've been here for a while. I think I'm just going to take a break from corporate. Like, I understand everyone's got, that's their goal and whatever, but probably that's not how I would like to operate. So I kind of, I just, left the job at that point, didn't really have an exact game plan in terms of what I wanted to do. And actually started up a business with not the guy that I have, that I'm working with now, who's my director. I started up business with another guy who kind of approached me. And when we started, this is before Sharp Instincts, we started up like another agency, and probably a month or so in, I realized probably choosing the wrong partner is a massive problem for you, for how you want to operate. So probably we set it up, and what I found was that like we weren't aligned in terms of our own, ethics, work effort, what our expectations were, values, exactly, right? So probably we did that for a couple of months, and I was like, this just isn't working for me. Like, I can't, I felt like it was all slanted towards me and not so much the other guy, and it just wasn't getting an equitable outcome. So I kind of, we left. I left that, and we just said, oh, look, I'll just see what's out there in corporate. Maybe I'll go back there. I wasn't really sure. And then, I happened to reach out, as you do when you're looking for stuff, you're just looking around LinkedIn to see what's out there and messaging people and kind of going through that sort of process. So I happened to reach out to a guy who we used to work with at the corporate place, and we'd left at a similar time, just coincidentally. And so he used to be on the sales side, and I used to do a lot of the marketing strategy. So we used to work really closely together. We'd work together for a while, like in corporate. So again, I probably had a much better understanding in terms of work rate, values, what he was bringing to the table versus what I was bringing to the table. And so we decided to just say, look, let's just try for a bit. I don't want to start into another partnership relationship this time unless I know for sure that it's the right call, because even setting up a business, there's a lot of involvement, time.
Oh, they're totally.
Yeah. So I was like, let's just try it for a bit. So we kind of went out, like, let's see if there's any value in terms of what we're even trying to do here, right? So, we went out, he had some relationships with some clients. So we went out and spoke to them, kind of pitched some ideas, and they were happy to essentially give us a go. So we tried that, and kind of, clients were receptive to probably what we were offering in terms of how we positioned ourselves and what our offering is to their business. And so as a result of that, we kind of said, all right, look, this seems to be working. We think there's a bit of traction here. Let's start up a business together and kind of go from there. And that was about 6 years ago now, and going from strength to strength. So obviously the clients are happy with what we're offering and bringing to the table, and we try and really be really part of the business as that kind of marketing arm of the business, so that's not necessarily sitting within the business, but very much part of the business.
Well, that's awesome. So how did you pick the name for the company, Sharp Instincts?
Yeah, we kind of went through a process of, I think the problem that everyone has that, if you're starting up now, right, is that like, you start thinking of names, you go through names, then it's like, all right, cool, let's go register the domain. And it's like, oh shit, that domain's gone, right? So especially if you're going to be an agency, right, or depending on whatever you're going to be, I'd actually say you probably need to start from that side first, to be honest. There's data from a domain side first. What's out there, right? Because there's no point going down the path and it's like, oh, well, then I'm going to have to do something else, or I'm going to have to change the domain to make it fit my name. And then it's like, so in our case, we just started going through. I was like, oh, what about this? What about this? And just kind of spitballing, brainstorming together. Is that available? Is this available? And then we kind of shortlisted a few that we thought was appropriate, and then probably spoke to some people that we trust. What do you think of this name? What do you think of that name? And then kind of ended up with Sharp Instincts. I mean, the funny thing is in Australia, everyone shortens everything. Like, I don't know if it's laziness or what it is, but, I'll still hear people call us just Sharp or just Instincts or whatever, but yeah, we're happy with the name, and probably also we want to be reflective of what we're bringing to the table, which is that, we're trying to make good decisions that are, pretty on the spot and pretty relative to what's going on with business. So kind of that's how we came up with that. And yeah, most feedback's been positive, I would say, about that name.
Oh, that's awesome. So how do you go about acquiring clients?
It's an ongoing challenge, I would say, as it would be with most businesses, right? There's a couple of things. I mean, look, depending on what your approach is and how you kind of go to the market, I mean, I guess the options that are available to agencies such as us is, having a salesperson is one. Which again, it's a hard one to know. Are they working, not working? That's probably a challenge. We've toyed with that at various stages in terms of sales. I think, look, if you're in a startup mode, probably the strongest chances you're going to have to win clients is your referral network. So people people you have a good starting base, and that's how we started, right? Like people we had some level of relationship with. If you then deliver to those clients, then generally you'll get referrals from them. So that probably network will continue to expand. Outside of that, I would encourage you to trial different things to see what works. So whether it's, marketing automation campaigns based on who's on your newsletter, is it Google ads, is it organic, is it SEO that drives results, LinkedIn campaigns. It's probably a matter of trial and see what works for you. And I think have a really clear idea in mind, but again, you've got to look at it holistically, like we were talking about before. Whereas, what's the overall lifetime value of the client, not just the initial costs? How much is that going to bring back to the business? And probably as a result, that'll increase the amount that you're willing to pay for a lead through to the business. But generally, the best ones will come from referral. They'll probably be the stickiest, if you will, in terms of willing to work with you and trust you. And the newer ones, you'll have to prove yourself a lot earlier than those that you have a relationship with, but that's probably the game.
Okay, that's awesome. Hey, you mentioned, about, just selling something to a client for the sake of selling it to them, which obviously doesn't sound like your style. So, but what is the best way to validate whether or not SEO or a specific marketing strategy will work for a prospective client?
I think
in your opinion.
Yeah. I think the first thing you really need to know is you need to understand the business. Like, what is it that you're actually trying to do? What product or service are you actually selling? Who is the target market? Have a look at competitors. You really need to understand what they're trying to do. And then I guess also, what are they measuring as success? Like some businesses look at revenue, some businesses look at profitability, some look at total client numbers. Like, you probably need to understand those pieces together to then, because if you really understand the business, then it'll become pretty apparent in terms of where the opportunity is for both you and the client. Having said that, I think organic will always play a role for clients, irrespective of industry. That's probably my experience. And then the other ones outside of that will probably come down to what are you trying to do? Where, what's the need of the business? Is it, I need to sell more stuff, or do I need to get more efficient? Or do I need to sell, into different sorts of clients? Or what's the, and everyone's different depending on the requirements of what you're after and what they're trying to do. And it's, whether, like, I'll give you an example. Like, we had one client that was a plumber, right? So plumbers are very competitive from a digital perspective, because pretty much you just have a truck. And then, and also hopefully a plumbing license, but at the very least a truck. And, obviously you're servicing a local area. So, in their case, their focus was, well, we don't really want the smaller clients. Like, I don't really want to go and fix someone's tap. I actually want to deal with the commercial clients, right? So because obviously that means less back and forth, less lead gen, larger clients, long-term business. That's probably more strategic. That's the area that we want to focus on. So, we came up with various strategies to kind of help drive that result. And, organic was a key one for them. So commercial plumber, Melbourne, for example, again, it's very location based. It's quite a lot of search volume for that keyword, and it's a
Yeah.
pretty competitive word. And they've been able to win that, and that's been really helpful in terms of driving revenue back to the business, getting large clients on board. Because if I don't know who a commercial plumber is, the first place I'm going is Google.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hey, what's the one thing that you've learned about SEO that has surprised you the most?
Well, to be honest, when I first started getting involved with it, I was just a total skeptic. I thought it was all bullshit, to be honest.
Okay.
Like, it was like,
fair enough.
I just thought it was, people selling dreams, because it's like, all right, I can get you the first page Google, and 3 months, and after 3 months, you'll start getting results, but I can't promise you anything, which, still sounds like a dream, to be honest, for a lot of people.
Sounds like bullcrap.
Yeah. And, and like a lot of people, you're asking them to trust you. Just like, oh yeah, it's going to work, and it's a difficult thing to actually grasp. But then probably what we've seen over time is the real value that if you do it properly and you manage it correctly, the actual revenue and impact it has on the business. And for those clients that we have, that have taken that advice on and kind of are winning organically, you see what happens. They're buying new businesses, they're buying new locations, they're growing their workforce, they're doing the sort of things that you do when the business is going well. You're not making those decisions when it's not. And I think, we're really big on aligning results back to internal business performance, right? So whatever those numbers are. So we've got a very clear understanding with our clients in terms of what's going on. And I think, organic, well, my biggest surprise was that it actually works. Like, if you can do it properly, it will be the biggest driver of the business.
Well, that's awesome. So how do you tie results? Like, how do you measure the results of what you're doing to the outcome of the business being successful? So, like, what KPIs, I guess,
it really depends on those discussions with the client initially. Like, how are you measuring the success of the business in terms of what's going on? But most of the time, it'll be revenue numbers, or it might be like, let's say we have a removalist, right? As a client. Removalist is quite a competitive area. Now, in their case, their metric for us, and it's obviously a discussion together, right? There's no point you telling me and I don't agree, and we've got to kind of come up with an agreed metric. But for them, it's and again, I'll just say probably focus on 1 or 2 max. If you're focusing on 5 to 10, that's probably not the solution either, because then it's just all gets kind of diluted. But in their case, this removalist, it's about how many online quotes and how many quotes a month are they doing, because obviously we can't necessarily impact the quotes versus converted sales. That's with their sales team. But how many quotes are you getting a month, right? So, you can set up goals in analytics, you can set up tracking depending on how they're set up in their CRM, whatever it might be, but looking at how many quotes they're getting a month. Now, we'll know before I even go and see them or discuss with them or have a call with them how the actual business is going before I speak to them, because we can see what the numbers are, and that's their metric that they're looking at. And, obviously there's percentages there that they'll be winning out of that number of quotes, and that'll give us a really good idea in terms of what's going on in the business. So I'd say, have an open discussion with them. What are they trying to do? Pick an agreed metric, and then that should be the focus about, kind of your strategies and what you're doing moving forward.
That's awesome. Hey, what is your approach to developing an SEO strategy for e-commerce websites? Because I know that's something you guys do.
Definitely it's something we do. And obviously it's an area that, more and more people are trying to get into and try and understand. And that means more competition, right? Because obviously if there's only X amount of spots on Google, and we're talking probably organics, a key one there, and, paid and shopping, and there's other obviously avenues as well. But I would say, start by looking at competitors, right? So if you're trying to sell, I don't know, let's say you're trying to sell coffee cups, right? So let's try to sell that kind of coffee cup, right? What's out there? Because the person who's ranking 1 for some of those key terms, you need to understand what they're doing, because that'll probably set the bar in terms of what level of expectation you need to have going into this project, right? Like if their website's really shit, then all right, that means probably the bar's not so high. But if you're looking at a site that looks like it's been e-commerce set up correctly, SEO, you got to understand the level of work involved. It is, to win e-commerce SEO is a lot of work, right? Like
it is, isn't it?
And you have to probably go through and look at you've got to look at all entities. So by that I mean you've got to look at what are the photos of the products you bring to the table, multiple photos, what are the descriptions, what level of kind of detail are you providing on every single product? Are you, I'd even suggest looking at some stuff like let's say, if we're using the coffee cup example, are there any tools or something you can help the clients with, right? You can help them to make it easier for them. So they might be like, you might have maybe a calculator that works out based on how many coffees a day you sell, how many cups you need to fill every 2 months, or something to try and kind of make it easier for them to try and manage the process, which might also drive more traffic and help your e-commerce SEO down the track. But you need to look at everything from, photos, descriptions, specs of the product, warranties, do you need videos of each of the products? Like all of these things kind of, it's a massive, if you look at a website that has thousands of products with all that kind of stuff on there, know that they have spent many, many hundreds of hours to get to that point. It's not something that it can easily take on, but you got to start somewhere and just probably focus on the key products. If you're going to kind of go if you're new to the market, focus on the products that make you the most money, and then kind of work your way backwards from the ones that make you the least money.
Absolutely. So how do you perform an e-commerce SEO audit? Like, for instance, to improve technical SEO, what sorts of things do you look for?
The main thing is use the tools that are out there. So whether it's Ahrefs, whether it's Uber Suggest as an example I used before, whether it's Moz is pretty good. That's one that we use quite a lot. You need to look at all the meta descriptions, title tags, look at the on-page basic SEO as a starting point. If you don't do that, then it doesn't matter what other stuff you do, you'll never win. So you've got to really focus on that. Use the tools that are out there to kind of help you assess your site. Are there broken links? Are there, do you have all the, Yoast, for example, if you're using a WordPress site, right? Which will tell you how long the description should be. Are there, have you loaded your sitemap? Have you done all the basic on-page stuff that you need in order to win? Because without that, you can't really win, I would say. So I'd say use the tools available. Again, probably goes back to what we were talking about before. Do some research, see what's out there. There's a bunch of articles written about talking about here's the 10, 15 things you should start with and go through. But I'd probably say focus on at least initially, the meta description and the title tag as a number one priority when you're setting up the e-commerce SEO side, because that has a big impact in terms of whether or not you can win for that product.
Right on. So how can e-commerce websites, like you mentioned marketing automation, how can they better use marketing automation to increase conversions on abandoned carts? Like, have you seen some strategies that you've implemented or some tips that you could share?
I think, again, like it probably comes back to what platform are you on initially, right? Because let's say you're in Shopify. A lot of that stuff's actually available really easily within Shopify. I mean, I'm not a Shopify, WordPress, etc. But, so Shopify will kind of have some stuff in there. I would say, depending on what level of automation you want to go down the path of, probably what I've seen works well is that you might, you send an initial abandoned cart email, probably the basic side, saying you haven't quite completed your purchase, and then maybe providing some offers. So they haven't quite finished the purchase, but potentially you give them some sort of incentive to then go and buy. Or maybe even you might send them down some different paths in terms of kind of education, depending on the size of the sale that you're talking about. If you're talking about some larger sales, it might not be just giving them a coupon will help them sale, right? It might be a matter of give them, all right, they haven't quite finished the part. Well, maybe they don't really understand yet the value of your product, right? So maybe let's more just send them down the path of explaining the value of what you offer. Right. So what is it, what's available? What are some of the pros of using your platform or using your product as opposed to other competitors, and really go down the education path, not just the coupon offer. It depends on what you're offering though, right? Like, some things, if you're trying to sell a t-shirt, probably that's not going to help. Like, you can't educate them about how awesome your t-shirt is for that many emails.
No. You think coupons work in that situation?
I think probably in that case, they may, again, like if you're a high-end brand, maybe not. Maybe you are trying to educate them down to purchase. But if it's a $30, $50 t-shirt, I think probably the best chance you'll have is to give them some sort of coupon to try and get them over the line. And again, one good thing about automation is just test everything, right? Test a bunch of stuff. So you might find that 5% coupon made no difference, but an 8% coupon got them over the line. So are you willing to give up that amount? And probably make sure that with any business, you should be looking at the profitability of whatever you're doing. But I guess my experience with automation and email marketing campaigns is, generally speaking, it's probably the best return on investment and probably the cheapest to run once you've got the database list. So I think it's an area that everyone should be focusing on. We were talking before we kicked off that it's not probably an area that everyone's totally across, but I think if you're looking at ways to increase your sales and revenue, then probably if they're already on your database, you've got some relationship there with them, and they may have bought from you before, and they're probably much easier to sell to than someone who's never heard of you before and trying to get them into the funnel. So probably use automation and use probably education as much as you can to try and help them teach you and learn about and teach them about your products and all the services you have.
Do you have any preferred marketing automation platforms or tools that you yourself would recommend to clients?
Yeah, I mean, look, we use Infusionsoft, or it's now Keep.
Keep.
But look, it's a really difficult one. Probably my experience with this is that once you pick one, it's really difficult to change, right? So because you get your CRM involved, you've got a database, it's you get everything set up. So probably what I would say is spend the time understanding what actually you need from the platform, because like a lot of the time you might find, all right, I'm spending all this money, but I don't need 95% of the features that are on here. I only need 1 or 2 or 3 really basic things, and that's it. So probably come up with a really good list of here's the features that I actually need from this, and then probably try and maybe do a trial, test a few out. How easy is it for you to use? I mean, it depends on how how good you are at dealing with. Some are probably more UX focused on the end client than others, I would say, depending on what you're after. I don't think it's really this is what you should sign up with. I think it's more understand what you need, and then probably have a look at a few different solutions that are out there and try and pick the one that matches to your business. None of them are going to be perfect, but you probably if you get 90%, then that's probably good enough, to be honest. I would find.
What do you love about Infusionsoft the most?
I mean, just in terms of the actual way that you can structure the automation campaigns, to be honest. I think that's the way that they've done that's probably as good as anyone. And I think that's probably what we've found the most valuable. But at the same time, even from our business, like there's a lot of stuff in there that we don't use, and it's a discussion we have all the time about it, right? Like, should we be using other features? But, again, even knowing how to use Infusionsoft, there's a skill set in itself there. So how difficult is it to actually, take on the skill, learn that? Do you have someone in your team that can manage it? Or are you asking someone like us to kind of manage it? So, I think that's probably also something that when you're considering the features, like who's going to actually own the process of creating campaigns, managing campaigns, etc. Because there is a lot of knowledge required to go through that process.
There is, isn't there? I don't think you and I know marketing automation, so we know how the depth of level of knowledge that you have to know when it comes to tagging and tagging strategy and implementation and so on and so forth. So yeah, it does. That's for someone thinking about marketing automation. That's some good advice. If there was one thing you could improve about Infusionsoft, what would it be?
It's probably just the complexity, right? Like as we were saying, I think really it's such a big beast now what they've created, and it's an amazing tool, right? But probably for most businesses, I would say it's too complex. They've made it so much of a behemoth, because of how many features and aspects they've got in there. I think probably that for me, it's a bit prohibitive, because you give it to someone who doesn't know anything, and it's like, whoa, what is all this? Again, it comes back to the features and what are you trying to do, and for a lot of businesses, it's probably not the right fit. Would be my outcome, my suggestion.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Richard, what is your greatest digital marketing success story that you could share with us, if you're able?
Yeah. I think, let me have a think about probably we have a turf customer. So a turf, like as in like real grass, that you kind of, put on your lawn or etc. You turn into a lawn. So probably we started working with this client, probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. And when we went and met with them, nobody was selling turf online, right? Because turf's a live plant. So it has a shelf life of 1 to 2 days. So once you drop it off on someone's house, if you don't do it, then it's essentially, it's done, right? And it starts getting brown, and no one wants that. So, we were really adamant that we could come up with a cool way to kind of have online store, both for buying turf online and even kind of really helping them and their customers to be able to purchase online. So by that, I mean, we spent a lot of time doing research about, well, what's the process you go through when you're buying turf, right? So the first questions you're kind of asking is, well, how much turf do I need, right? Like, how do I even measure how much turf I need for my lawn? Because a lot of the time they're different shapes, right? I've got a triangle, I've got a square, but then I've got a half circle at the end, and you know what I mean? And it's quite complex. We did a lot of research and no one had really kind of answered it. There was a few kind of half-baked calculators out there, but probably what we decided was, if we can come up with a cool calculator to help people understand how much turf they need, and then make the process really smooth for them to actually then go and buy it. Obviously, then you've got to be able to deliver the turf, which we were confident that they would be. We thought that it could definitely work. And kind of, so we built them a new site that had this kind of online aspect with the turf calculator. And that has been a massive success story for them. So probably, from an aspect that didn't exist, they're probably doing, over, a couple of $1 million just in online sales.
Wow.
From turf, right? So
that's amazing.
And it's been, it's helped completely change the business in terms of how they operate, in terms of, they used to have to answer phone calls every time, talk to the customer. This is the sort of turf. So pretty much they had a whole suite of people just answering phone calls all the time. Now they're happy not to talk to anyone. They're just like, just bring the online sales in and we can kind of just manage that process. So that's been, a massive win for them, and probably, good to see when you come up with a strategy, it does it actually, to actually see it the full way through, and that business just keeps going from strength to strength. So that's probably one that sticks out in my mind.
That's awesome. Hey, what has been your biggest challenge that you've come across during your career?
I think the biggest challenge for us, and probably most businesses, particularly now, is staff. How do you get the right people? Finding the right people is a real challenge. And the work, the jobs, you can, whatever your process and setup is, you can teach people most things. But how do you find the right person to bring in, and with the right level of passion and enthusiasm, and whatever your metrics are, whether it's attention to detail, motivation, whatever those kind of things are that are important to you and your business. Finding the right staff, I think, will be a key determinant for any business, irrespective of what you do, to determine whether or not you're going to be a success. Yeah,
absolutely. So how do you attract quality talent then? How do you as an agency, I mean?
Yeah, look, I think it's a matter of meeting people, going out there, being open to, these days probably it's a competitive industry. You've got to be out there promoting your brand to some degree. But also, don't just judge. I think probably for me, I'm willing to meet with most people, right? Like at least have a chat, try and get an understanding. Sometimes the CV doesn't tell you the whole story. I want to understand why they want to do it, what they're after. Probably have a chat to them, and maybe you might also have your own internal tools for how you're trying to measure for what are those. Once you decided what those things you want from your company are, how are you then trying to measure those people coming in on those skills? So we've got our own tools to try and measure, to try and work out, are we bringing in the right staff? But again, it probably comes down to what are you trying to do, and what are the sort of people you're trying to attract. Trying to attract a creative person versus a developer is a very different discussion in terms of what you're trying to go through the process of.
Oh, absolutely. So are there any special tips you'd be willing to share with our audience that they could implement and gain some benefits from?
I would say, from a tips perspective, I feel like I hope I've been relatively helpful with the tips side, but I would say, look, the thing that I think a lot of people miss, it's not so much a tip tool, but I would say focus on, especially if you're a newish startup, right? I think probably one thing that gets overlooked is actually focusing on the financials and focusing on the profitability of your business. Like I think a lot of people was like, yes, I just sold 1,000 coffee cups. But then when you actually do the numbers and you work out what's involved in this and that, you actually haven't made any money at all. Right?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And I think that gets overlooked a lot, and people don't really talk about that a lot. And half the time, even when you're breaking down those numbers, a lot of the time you're not even including your own time as a cost. You've just like, yes, I've sold all this and whatever, but I'm actually, you haven't actually made any money. So I think probably have those numbers. And look, I will, by my own admissions, I'm not great at that area, right? I've tried to make myself better at it. And I would also say my business partner is really good at it, right? In terms of pushing me to make sure. And when I'm looking for a business partner, probably another tip, find someone that, if you are wanting to, and I'm all for it. I think a lot of people want to go it alone. I think finding someone that has a complementary skills to you is really valuable, just to being able to sit there and kind of bounce ideas off each other. If you're both bringing the same skills to the table, then potentially that's not so beneficial. But if you're, but if you're bringing different skills to the table, and obviously there's some overlap in terms of what we're doing and whatever, but I would say, having someone with different skill sets and really focusing on the financials to try and work out, all right, what do I actually need to do here to make money, profitability, that'll stack up. Because if you don't have that number in mind initially, then you're going to find all of a sudden like, oh yeah, I've sold all this stuff, but then you get a bill from the tax department, or you get a bill from this, or you get a bill from there. It's like, oh shit. I'm like, I don't know, all of a sudden, I'm like, I don't have any money. So and that's, part of, I guess, my experience in terms of running a business as well. But I would say, if I were to do it again and start up a new business, having profitability at the front, and because revenue is just a number, right? Revenue is not a number that actually tells you a real story. There's plenty of businesses that have massive revenue numbers, but they don't make any money. And I think, in Australia, for example, there's some really big builders who've just gone under. Obviously, COVID's a big factor there in terms of what's happened. But then you hear them talk about the numbers, and they've done like, $1 billion in revenue, but $5 million profit. So obviously, you haven't been focusing on that as a key variable, right? And if you're in that sort of situation where that's what the books say, any slight change in terms of what's going on, and you're going to be in trouble. So you really need to have profitability at the forefront of your mind when you're running a business or starting a business, to make sure that, you can weather good times and bad times, and that the numbers will stack up no matter what.
Hey, that's some awesome advice. No, thanks for sharing that. Same here. I wish I'd focused on that more when I first started. So I'm just going to ask you 5 rapid fire questions. Before I do, if people want to find out more about you, where would they do that online?
You probably best is you can find me on LinkedIn, Richard Monheit, or probably just go to a website, and I'm on there. Happy to, as I said, Facebook, I don't really mind. You can find me, just search my name. There aren't too many Richard Monheits floating around. There's actually one with my Google nemesis. Is a doctor, a cardiologist in America, but I think I got him recently. So we'll depends on where you are, but yeah, I think he's resigned. So I think he's retired. So I think that's helping my cause as well. But
there you go. So what was your first job?
McDonald's.
Where did you go on your last vacation?
Where did I go? I'm just trying to remember. It's been a long time because of COVID. I think it was Hawaii.
Hawaii, right on. What's your favorite meal of the day?
Breakfast. I actually think about breakfast before I go to sleep.
Oh, right on. I like breakfast too. What time do you usually wake up in the morning?
About 5:30. Try to hit up the
And Android or iOS?
Android phone, Mac computer. So I'm one of those weird guys.
Oh, that is weird. Right on. Well, hey, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today, taking time out of your day. It's been awesome chatting with you.
Likewise. Thanks for the time, and thanks for having me on.
No problem. Thank you very much.